How has racism and discrimination been perpetuated? When contemplating this question, we have to remember that race is not something you're born with. It is something assigned to you by the dominant group, and one would argue that pluralism has never been part of the plan. It has always been assimilation, segregation, or annihilation, based on the historical record. The Jim Crow laws in the South prohibited and confined the African American to live in a substandard subhuman existence. In a country they had already shed blood for, and despite what some people believe, practically built. They were not allowed to vote, not allowed to carry arms, not allowed in the military, not allowed opportunity to better themselves, not allowed to learn how to read, and denied basic human rights. All this was done with the backing of the courts. This is called de jure segregation. De jure segregation occurred in the United States for many years after the Civil War. During this time, many former Confederate states passed Jim Crow laws that required segregated facilities for blacks and whites. These laws were codified in 1896's landmark Supreme Court case Plessy v. Ferguson, which stated that separate but equal facilities were constitutional. For the next 5 decades, blacks were subjected to legalized discrimination, forced to live, work, and go to school in separate, but unequal, facilities. It wasn't until 1954 in the Brown v. Board of Education case that the Supreme Court declared that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal, thus ending de jure segregation in the United States. By that time the damage had already been done. These laws promoted segregation and fostered the white superiority belief that blacks were inferior. There were those who taught through the manipulation of scientific facts that blacks were subhuman and therefore not worthy to be equal to the superior white race. It has been hypothesized that race would still exist no matter what laws are passed. This is called de facto segregation, which is a provable phenomenon in American society today. Everything speaks of separation from the skin tone band-aids of the 60s and 70s, which were the skin tone of whites, to the redlining of certain sections of the community that put Negroes in low-income housing next to factories that causes negative effects on their health up, and until this day. All the while refusing health care, is all a part of the discriminatory practices of the dominant group. While most white people are willing to admit that non-white people live with a set of disadvantages due to the color of their skin, very few are willing to acknowledge the benefits they receive. All at the same time, marijuana users were sentenced to twice as much jail time to heroin and powder cocaine users, making prison the solution for the addicted during what they call the war on drugs. Only now to be plagued by an opioid epidemic, and consider treatment and not jail the top solution for them when it is that most uses of opioids are whites. The redlining and denial of bank loans to blacks so that they could enrich and grow their business caused the neighborhoods in which they were living in to go down in property value. And loss of representation, and practice called racial steering, in which real estate agents direct prospective homeowners toward or away from certain neighborhoods based on their race, only betrays the ignorance of white benefits. What are the effects of racism in America? The effects of racism can be seen in the high crime rate, high imprisonment among Negroes, high rate of one-parent households, high dropout rate in schools, the high unemployment rate, homelessness and drug addiction, and the high rate of high blood pressure and hypertension in the underrepresented communities. Poverty and broken homes are all a part of the results of systemic racism and the manufactured deviance, caused by the inequality of resources not afforded to those of color, leading to high incarceration rates. Historically, the dominant group has always considered women an underclass, and even until this day. Not just black men but women have had to suffer not only racism but sexism also, in the home, at their job, and in society in general. In conclusion, the climate is changing. The foundation of any structure determines the stability, longevity, and habitability of that structure. No matter how attractive the architecture or wonderful the walls are constructed, there is an inescapable code that all things built to last must meet in order to guarantee safety. And for there to be the expectation of long-time success, even when climates change. The foundation determines the legitimacy and/or viability of the thing built on it, while simultaneously regulating what can be built on it and how high it can be built. In other words, the foundation determines if a structure can be safely inhabited, or if it will be able to withstand changing climates. The dominant group here in America, with the aid of slave labor, has built a very remarkable country, one that is known as the best in the world, with its great economic wealth, its storied scientific achievements, and unmatched military strength. It is a country that many clamor to get into, even risking life and limb for the chance at the so-called American dream. However, the climate is changing here. America's symbol, the Statue of Liberty, holds a light that beckons the tired, poor, and huddled masses yearning to breath free to its shores. And its mantra is known as the land of the free, and the home of the brave, but it is known that there is a much darker side to the founding of this country. One that is interwoven into the fabric and foundation of its hidden history. A foundational history so unattractive that the threat of its recalling is the stuff that drives voters to the voting booth, to vote against the supporters of its telling. A history that tells of murder, theft, rape, lies, and cultural genocide, to name a few, often hidden from public examination. So the question is, can this country continue to stand the way it is? I think not, because the climate is changing and America has not fixed her foundation yet. America has not lived up to the standards of the God it claims. A God of righteousness, of justice, a God that sees all and knows all. What will this new year bring in light of all this? Just a few of my thoughts. Bishop Adrian Goodlow.